Grimsby Chums were a British First World War Pals battalion of Kitchener's army raised in and around the town of Grimsby in Lincolnshire in 1914. When the battalion was taken over by the British Army, it was officially named the 10th Service Battalion, the Lincolnshire Regiment, and it was the only Pals battalion to be known as the Chums. When the call came from Lord Kitchener for volunteers, the headmaster of Winchlingham Grammar School in Grimsby decided to raise a 250-strong company of former pupils which would be based at the armoury of the school's officer training corps. The company was offered to the local territorial force, the 5th Battalion, but then the battalion was full. When other Grimsby men expressed a wish to join, the process was handed over to the town council to set about recruiting sufficient men to form an entire battalion for Kitchener's army. The Grimsby Chums was trained locally, and ex-army men were recruited to be able to train them in the ways of fighting in a war. They initially trained at Clee Field, which is today where King George V Stadium is, opposite what was at the time Wheelsby Camp, where Wheelsby Woods is today. Initially they were given civilian clothing, and that is how they trained. They did not have any guns or any real weapons to be able to use because it wasn't available in a time of war. 250 men initially joined, and they were quickly given the ability and told that they were going to go across to France to fight. So they then decided to form their own battalion, and this got up to over 700 men. They began to recruit from villages around Grimsby, and it eventually spread to as far as Barton and Scunthorpe. Wakefield also joined as well, when they knew that the Grimsby Chums were definitely going to go to France, as the men were so keen to be able to fight for their country. Brocklesby Estate was then made available to them by Lord Yarborough. When they went across the Brocklesby Estate, he let them use the land to be able to build trenches, to be able to use bayonets, and actually begin to practice starting for a war. When the men initially went across, they were given a uniform which was made after something called blue serge, which was normally used for postal workers at the time. Then gradually, as the uniforms became available, they were able to change to khaki. The camp that was set up in Brocklesby in 1914 was courtesy of Lord Yarborough, but it was paid for by the borough of Grimsby. And here, this is where they practiced digging their trenches and using a bayonet, to be able to move up to France either late 1915 or early 1916. When they were in Brocklesby, they lived in wooden huts, and each group of men would be able to live in a wooden hut together, and they developed close friendships. This sense of camaraderie is something which really helped them during their time in the war. They then later moved to near Warminster to do their final training, before they went off to France in January 1916. January 1916, there was 600 miles of trench system. When they arrived in France, they had to gradually work their way towards where they were going to fight on the front line. The men gradually became used to trench life. However, they did start to suffer casualties, averaging around 4 to 5 men per month. They managed to reach the Somme region in June 1916, and here the Germans had taken the high ground, so the Chums were able to mine underground and place mines at places like Hawthorne Ridge. The army then moved forward when these were blown up. On the 1st of July, 72,000 tons of explosives were detonated at 7 a.m. And apparently the shockwaves were so strong that the Germans had their legs broken, and also people could apparently hear the explosion in London. Now, C.S. Lewis was actually flying a plane above at the time. C.S. Lewis is the man who wrote Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And when he was flying that plane above, he was told to keep it at a height of 300 feet, because that's how much they thought the explosion was going to go up into the air. However, the explosion actually went above him by an extra 500 feet and ended up nearly knocking his plane out of the air. The crater that you can see is something called Loch Nagar crater. This is 300 feet wide by 80 feet deep, and this is where the initial explosion occurred. When this explosion occurred on the 1st of July 1916, it marked the first day of the Battle of the Somme, which was the bloodiest battle in British history. 20,000 people died on the very first day of that battle. When the explosion happened, Grimsby Chums were about 150 yards back, between 150 yards and 135 yards back from there. And they were able to gradually advance and move forward. And as they moved forward, this is when the German machine gunners came out of their own trenches and began to attack the advancing troops. and unfortunately the majority of Grimsby Chums were lost on that day, with many of them actually climbing into the crater to be able to try to protect themselves. To mark this is a bench that is at Loch Nagar crater. It is dedicated to the Grimsby Chums and their sacrifice and their bravery on the 1st of July 1916. After the war, the Grimsby Chums were disbanded as they were no longer needed. When they came home, they stayed in touch, with many of them meeting up very frequently, particularly to go to church services at St James in Grimsby. The last meeting of the Grimsby Chums took place in 1977. Many of them ended up working together, and actually most volunteered for World War II, and ended up guarding Grimsby and Immingham docks, as well as working in radar facilities. Quite a few of them ended up working together at the Waltham Wireless Station, which is today where the houses on Trafalgar Park in New Waltham are. All of that land behind Trafalgar Park was a wireless station at the time. Now for me, Grimsby Chums are really important, particularly for my family history. So my great-granddad's brother, my great-granddad called Stanley, his brother actually died on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, and he was a Grimsby Chum himself. So G.E. Hunter served with the 10th Battalion Lincolnshire Regiment, and he's actually buried in La Boisselle, which is very, very close to where the Loch Nagar crater is. He was born in 1892, and he's known to the family as Sonny. And I don't know why he has that nickname, but his nickname is Sonny. He actually works as a slater, roof slater, being able to put the tiles on top of roofs before he went off to the war. And he's registered in the 1911 census as being a roof slater. He ended up dying on the first day of the Battle of the Somme at the age of 24, and he left 8 brothers and sisters. When he died, his pension, as he was unmarried, ended up going to his mother, who then died very shortly after, and then it ended up going to his father.